Welcome to Depth of Field, an independent filmmaking podcast hosted by Dr. Mike White and Shelby Hagerden, independent filmmakers and industry professionals. Episodes will touch on recent films, the state of the industry, the regional scene in Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota, the occasional gear discussion, and interviews. Stay up to date with our current episodes on Spotify and YouTube.
Hello and welcome to the Depth of Field podcast for the week of June 14th, 2024. I am Dr. Mike White.
And I am Shelby Hagerden.
And on this episode, we're going to talk about several things, including the new Panasonic Lumix GH7 and the Blackmagic new Cine Apple immersive camera. Also, we're going to have interviews with Joe Frenna, the producer of Spots of Waverly, and Nebraska filmmaker Tom, I believe it's Knoblauch, producer of Moving Parts. Mm-hmm. So, first of all, let's get started. So much exciting news this week, Shelby. So much exciting news. So, first of all, let's do a little bit of tech news.
Yep.
Panasonic released the new GH7 small body camera. Mm-hmm. This was a big release at $2,200. And what do you think of the price point?
It's an okay price point for what it is, I think.
Mm-hmm. You sound doubtful.
I don't know.
It is slightly bigger and heavier. Something I want to talk about with the Panasonic GH5 is there is a very camera, which is a prosumer camera called the GH5. The GH5 is used by a lot of great filmmakers. I have a couple of students that are really established cinematographers that use the GH5. It uses micro four thirds lenses. And for those of you who aren't real familiar with cinematography for small budget projects, micro four thirds lenses are inexpensive and they're really, really great, primarily in kind of the prosumer line.
Yep, and they're easily accessible.
Lots of different people make them and very, very affordable. Yep. So that's one of those things. This camera came out using the sensor from another camera called the G9 Mark II. The GH9 Mark II or I shouldn't say GH9, but the G9 Mark II is also a camera that is not full frame. It is still micro four thirds, but it had a little bit of a superior sensor because it had like improved dynamic range. Now that G9 camera, one of the things about it is it's a really fantastic camera for still use. And really for me, I don't know how I feel about the lack of full frame in this camera. I think they're trying to compete with some other products. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I mean, for me, I think it's a great, for me, the small body cameras is the benefit is it's a small body camera.
Meaning that it's agile?
It's agile. So making it bigger and heavier a little bit is, I'm trying to fit more things in, but not having a full frame when we're making it bigger and heavier.
Yeah.
It's fine. And I think there's definitely some improvements that have been made. But I don't know. It's just, for me, it's if I want a little agile camera, I'm probably going to reach for a Sony.
Yeah.
And
that's the whole thing. I think what you're saying there is what everybody's thinking, like the FX3. Mm-hmm. And for people who aren't really familiar, and we'll back up a couple of steps, having a full frame sensor means you're going to have, kind of greater collection of information. So you're going to have a much greater image. Also, it means that you can use, a different variety of lenses with it as well.
Yep.
So really one of the big advantages of the Sony FX3, and this is a camera that's actually been used, some movies that with some very large budgets. The creator, I can't remember the budget on that film. I think 80 million. So that film was actually shot on that camera because it was agile. Now, of course, it was rigged really well. But if you're going to, and that, I think the price point on that camera is a little over $3,000. Mm-hmm. So, at $2,200, gee whiz, if you're going to do that, you might as well, bite the bullet and go up. Yeah. So that's kind of one of the things that I was thinking there too. The real advantage of Panasonic's GH5 is its cost.
Yep.
And I also think too, it's a really great introductory camera for students.
But $2,200 is a lot for somebody just getting into things.
Yeah.
Especially when you don't have that full frame.
And I don't see it competing against the Sony.
I don't see it either. Especially when you have the GH5 already out there, something that you can get
very
less
inexpensively. Yeah.
And you can get it used inexpensive.
Yeah.
And
there's several incarnations of that camera. There are some other improvements to this camera, and I don't mean to sink the boat on it too much, but it uses CF Express or SD cards, which is great. Something that I like in this is that it shoots in ProRes RAW 4K, and I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, the collaboration with Apple with that, I think, is great.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. It's like, so being able to get that to work, especially with the Apple folks, and that Apple, I don't know how that worked. And that's in a small body. So that's a pretty great thing. I mean, the thing with small bodies is they've been using, for example, like the little Ninja monitors as an external that record in 4K. And for people who don't know, 4K RAW, especially in ProRes, is a really preferred format because when the camera records in this, a lot of the commercial editing software, like Avid, for example, or for Adobe Premiere Pro, that's going to be another one of those that you're able to go ahead and record in that format. People have been using these external monitors to be able to do that as well. And those are like the Ninja monitors. We're actually going to purchase one of those for use with some anamorphic lenses at the college because our camera has some limitations as far as the squeeze in there. But that monitor will still do the 4K RAW recording in there. And that's actually how, when they made the Creator, they were able to get that small body camera to really work for that picture. And that is something that works incredibly well. So, and that's native in this camera, and that's a
plus, big time.
And here's the other thing that I haven't seen in anybody else's small cameras is it's got floating point sound. And if you're not familiar with floating point sound really revolutionized the micro budget filmmaking because the sound quality from that format is fantastic. We used Zoom recorders that didn't have floating point, then changed to floating point. It completely changed the quality of sound for 100%. Our films. And now you can do that without having an external sound recorder in the camera. So, maybe that is one of the reasons to look at this camera, that having that floating point eliminates that need for, an external recorder. Not that it can handle all the same things that the external recorder can. You guys are going to have to excuse us a little. Francois, the dog, is very upset. So, I'm not exactly sure what the situation is with that, but hopefully he'll calm down. Also, with this, you can use in-camera LUTs in the camera as well. So that's a huge factor.
For me, a lot of this comes down to, are you looking for something that works really, really well in production and is really agile? Or are you looking for something that might help you more in the pre-production process? Because already having the ProRes RAW right there, already ready to go, floating point sound, and the in-camera LUTs, which, if you're a director, you want to be able to see what this is going to look like colored. It's very helpful. I'm always a little afraid of in-camera LUTs. I've heard some horror stories of it getting baked in. But, as long as it's quality, I think there's definitely some positives. I think this is a great camera to be able to kind of see good quality in your post-production. But I don't know about how it works on set.
I think I love seeing Panasonic be this competitive, and I think the next phase is a full frame.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah,
which honestly I would be really excited about.
Oh yeah,
a full frame at a lower price point from Panasonic with the ProRes floating point would be stellar. And
they've got some really good cameras that are full cinema cameras that are large body cameras that are awesome cameras. So I don't think that's no surprising bridge. There was another thing that had happened this past week at the Apple Worldwide Developers Conference. Apple broke some information they weren't supposed to break. So Blackmagic, for people who had listened to any of our previous episodes, had probably heard about the new Blackmagic Cinema 12 camera, which was a new incarnation of the Blackmagic 12 camera, which we shoot on all the time. It's a fantastic camera. So there's a new incarnation of that, but now there's going to be another incarnation of that, which is going to be the Blackmagic Cinema Apple Immersive Camera. Okay. Yeah. So if you're wondering what that is, it's a stereoscopic camera, which means that it basically has two lenses that kind of simulate the human eyes. So what you can do is have a 3D experience by watching that footage. This is something that people have been doing kind of on the lower level. I mean, you see kinds of video and stuff.
Yep.
But now this is something that they want to break into immersive. Mm-hmm. This is not surprising for Blackmagic. I think you and I both listened to a really good interview. I think it might have been No Film School with the president of Apple that talked about the future of their products.
Well, not Apple, but Blackmagic.
I'm sorry, Blackmagic, the future of Blackmagic. And one of the things in there was that they want to compete in a lot of these other things, like the immersive camera lines. They're also talking about doing some, virtual reality type things, that kind of stuff with those cameras. So this doesn't really surprise me. I'm really loving the partnership, which means that maybe we're going to see some ProRes RAW and some other things in Blackmagic cameras. So I'm really excited about that. Also, I'm wondering how much this may have to do with the merger between Red and Nikon.
Yeah.
So now that there's a merger between Red and Nikon, what happens with Apple ProRes is Apple ProRes, in some different places. We just saw this in the G9. We're seeing Blackmagic collaborating with them. So what happens with that codec? And that ability to record in that format is really super important. So I'm not exactly sure what that means for the future. But let's kind of go through, we'll kind of go through some of the bullet points of this and kind of just rattle those off.
Let's do it. So starting off, dual custom lens system for shooting Apple video for Apple Vision Pro.
Okay, so that means it's going to have a lens system, which it looks like is being developed by Blackmagic. I assume they're working with a lens manufacturer to do that. So that's kind of the king. Also, the next thing, it's got the 8K stereoscopic 3D immersive image capture. Okay. So this format is going to be 8K. I assume it can't do 12K because of how that image capture actually works.
Which makes sense to me.
Yeah. Okay.
8160 by 7200 resolution per eye with pixel level synchronization.
And if you do the math on that, that basically looks like pretty much a division of that 8K. So that makes, a lot of sense.
With massive 16 stops of dynamic range.
Which is the same as their cinema camera because it's built on the same platform.
Lightweight, robust camera with industry standard connections. Makes sense.
Same stuff.
Blackmagic. Generation 5 color science with new film curve. Excited.
Yep. And this is part of their color science where they're doing this thing
Which he's been really interested, the president of Blackmagic, because he's a post-production guy.
Yep.
And he's been really, really immersed in color.
And that's why when you take a look at DaVinci Resolve is the industry leader in color.
Yep.
So, and that's basically because that's been one of their big focuses. 90 frames per second capture to a single Blackmagic RAW file. I'm not exactly sure because I've never really worked in 3D immersive what that would be. I'm assuming the minimum speed is 30 frames a second.
Yeah, it kind of depends, especially with AR, because I've done some work in AR, and usually it's standard usually, you can do 24.
Oh, really?
But,
like cinema?
30 is better.
I was going to say 30 seems standard because when I worked in television years ago, 30 was always the standard. Also, it can utilize the Blackmagic Media Module. We talked about that in a previous episode, which is up to 8 terabytes. So that's something really cool that's come out and kind of happened since. That's actually a really neat thing on that platform.
Now, the high-speed Wi-Fi 10 gig Ethernet or mobile data for network connections is awesome. And it's one of their big things right now because they want to be able to connect editors to their cameras instantly.
I'm doubtful.
I know. I really want to see what this looks like in practice in the field. I think it'll be interesting.
And the last bullet point we'll get on this is it does use the optional Blackmagic Ursa Cine electronic viewfinder.
I'm excited about this because I work in animation. We do AR, immersive work. I think it'll be cool to be able to see this. I don't know what the price point is yet.
Nobody
But
does.
with Blackmagic, I'm hoping it's going to be something fairly accessible to people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm excited to see what people create out of it, because this is something, I mean, I haven't really seen this in the hands of a lot of indie creators before. And especially like from my side of things, I'd love to see a lot more live action and animation combined in this. So I think there's a lot of potential.
It's interesting since NAB, what the attitudes are about Blackmagic as a company, and people are really now are like Blackmagic's leading the pack.
Yep. Which is great.
Yeah, but you've got some folks that are in a state of flux.
Yep.
Nikon is looking to do some things. Red didn't really have a big release, but I mean, I think part of the thing with Red is that they're going through a transition with their merger. There's some stuff out there. The NAB next year should have a ton of cool stuff.
Well, and my guess too is I think Red's probably building something that's really cool for next year.
Maybe.
And I
don't
mean,
know.
especially with that's what I would be doing, especially since we've been getting so much from Blackmagic
Yeah.
in the last couple of months. I mean, if I were Red, I would be hitting the ground running with that. With that merger.
And Red's got some great things. They still have that fantastic sensor.
Mm-hmm.
They've always had that wonderful recording format. I mean,
Yep.
there's, Red's still a major player. So, I mean, I think that's important. As far as local news goes, I wanted to talk about the Depth of Field Festival, which is coming up. So submit your films, submit your films. We got a bunch of submissions this past week.
We've got a really cool website
We
that
do.
you can access through the Facebook page, or if I think you can probably just put in Depth of Field.
Depth of Field Film Festival, and you can submit on Film Freeway, and it's going to be awesome. We've got some really great workshops. Those are free, but they are limited seating, so we can only take so many people in those. So if you workshop, make sure that you reserve a seat.
And that is for any filmmakers in Iowa, South Dakota, or Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a special thing for Film La Femme with my group for diverse filmmakers.
Mm-hmm.
So please submit, because I want to see some diverse filmmakers.
And we are very excited about that portion of the festival. Yep. So also, I have some news. Yes. We a while back, I decided that I would submit to the UCLA pre-professional program in screenwriting.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a degree-seeking program. I already have a couple of college degrees.
Yep.
Actually, I have 3, but hence the doctor title. So this is a program for people that are not seeking a degree, but you get to participate in the screenwriting program at UCLA for 3 semesters. And they mentor you through writing two feature screenplays. Each workshop is only 10 seats. I had applied a while back, and I was notified about a week ago that I was in. That I got a seat in there. So
congratulations.
Thank you so much. But the reason we're mentioning this on the show is that it will probably affect the Depth of Field podcast a little bit. Right now, we are at twice a month. We're thinking we're probably going to go to once a month during that time. Because just to be really frank, I'm going to be very, very busy writing and studying during that time period. But don't worry, that doesn't start until September, the end of September. Mm-hmm. So until then, we are going to stick with our 2 episodes a month to make sure that everybody is really informed.
I'm sure we will give a reminder in September.
Yes,
that is happening.
So awesome. So that's very exciting, and I'm really excited.
Congrats.
So awesome.
Everybody tell Mike congratulations.
Thank you so much. Okay, on the next segment, we're going to have a couple of really great filmmakers. But first of all, we've got a new friend, Tom Knoblauch. And I think, Tom, I don't think we've ever really talked before. I know we've just kind of maybe shook hands or said hi, but I don't think we've ever really met. So this is going to be a really great chance to get acquainted. So first of all, welcome to the show.
Yeah. I think Shelby, you and I had sort of met because I did the panel at the Flatwater Film Festival last year. So it's great to meet you, not in person, but closer to in person here. More casual.
I feel more connected now, which is weird since we're so far away, but
Yeah. Well, she realized that. She goes, "Oh, we were on a panel together."
Yeah, it's like,
so it's like, oh, I see.
You popped up and it's like, oh yeah, we know of each other. We're there.
Outstanding. So we just had a really good time watching your 2020 film, Moving Parts. Moving Parts is a really, really fun film. And if you haven't seen it, it's very clever. It's about a child actor who comes home to Omaha to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award, although he's not even 30. But because there's not an extraordinary number of actors that come from there, he was kind of an obvious choice. So it is a very clever comedic thing about coming home again, and it's very cute. So first of all, I just wanted to go ahead and, before we get into the picture a little bit more, your background and how you got into filmmaking. We looked at your website and you've got so many hats on there. We were kind of like, how did this guy get into filmmaking?
Yeah, too many hats, probably. As you probably relate, there's a degree of compulsion, right? You sort of, when you want to do this and you are willing to do that dance of willing a movie into existence, once you figure out how to do that, you get that itch again and you sort of keep going back to it, in my experience. But filmmaking was one of the first things I was doing before I started doing all these other things like radio and, whatever else. But I started off about 10 years ago. I made a movie because I'd always sort of wanted to. I've been writing screenplays since I was in, middle school or whatever. But then you reach that point where it's a lot harder to actually figure out, okay, how do I actually make the thing? And also, the first time you make a thing, you don't know so many of the things you don't know. And there's that beautiful mixture of ambition and stupidity that leads to something interesting generally, but not always great. So my first movie was called Almost a Weekend, and it was 2015, I think. We would have shot it 10 years ago, and I had enough money to rent equipment for a weekend. So I had 4 days with my cast and my crew. And my crew was like 2 people. My cast was, I think, 6 people. And none of them had acted before in any meaningful way. And I sort of thought, like, well, we can figure this out in 4 days. And we shot a movie, big mess. There's about 15 minutes that's funny in it. But that was kind of the start. And then since then, there was a while I was doing it about every year. Now I've sort of slowed down because I've got other stuff going on. But yeah, you catch that bug, you can't get rid of it, can you?
Feel that.
Yeah, I know. We always seem to be in production, whether it be, well, we take turns, of course. I think like any couple that's in filmmaking, I do a film and Shelby does a film. And right now we're in the midst of a couple of shorts and stuff like that too. But it
never quits.
It never, and even though we seem like we're going to say, well, we're going to take a break, we never really do.
You can't.
We can't. Okay.
Well, awesome. So getting into that then, what inspired you as a filmmaker? What inspired this film in particular?
So I'd say this film sort of comes out of a couple of things. One was the logistics of what could I get off the ground. So we filmed the movie in 2020, and then it's been kind of doing this long rollout of festivals, and it's on streaming now. But the original plan was to start filming March 2020, which, as you might recall, was not a great time to try to wrangle a bunch of people in public and do things. And so it sort of got delayed, but it was sort of a thing where we could have just not filmed it, or we could have tried to will it into existence again. But that meant it was going to be kind of this sparse thing that's sort of seasoned by the pandemic, which was ongoing. And I was just sort of hoping that nobody would die as we made it. And this was before vaccines and all of that even. So the movie comes out of conversations I had with Will Forget, who plays the lead. And we've known each other for a long time. He was in that first movie that I'd made. And there's kind of that rapport that I think is interesting and funny when 2 people are forced to be in a room together and they don't really like each other. That's one of my favorite pieces of tension. And so a movie that I'm certainly drawing from is The Trip by Michael Winterbottom with Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon. And it's become a series of movies. There's the mini-series versions of each of those movies. And it's really this simple idea of these 2 guys, one really wants to be taken seriously, one doesn't care, but they each sort of eat each other's insecurities. And you learn so much about what drives them and what bothers them without having to have a whole lot of complex drama, which I knew in March 2020 I was not going to be able to do a complicated shoot exactly. So how much could I get out of 2 guys mostly talking to each other? How much tension could I find there? And then how much could I make that have an actual rhythm? Because I've tried in the past in some unsuccessful variations to do really long, really scripted dialogue scenes. And there's a way to do that has the right momentum that doesn't get boring. I didn't quite have enough people around me, and my own sense was not good enough to know how to do that. So the real trick of this one was Will and I would come up with ideas for how the scenes would go. Sometimes we'd have a script. Other times we'd just kind of I'd pick a thing, he'd tell a story, we'd do it a couple of times, and we always had multiple cameras running, and we'd build the scene as we went, because I knew I didn't want any of the scenes to be that long. So I needed to find that right 2 or 3 minutes at most, and then sort of build it from there. But the arc had to be simple enough that we could do that and it didn't feel too meandering to an audience.
I really enjoyed the style of this film, and Shelby and I, there's another film that we just watched called The Spots of Waverly, which is, we're going to interview that director next. But these two films had something in common, and I think this is why I paired the two directors together, is there was a time kind of before Sundance where you could just rent a 16 millimeter film camera, shoot for a while, and then you would have this great film that was made by friends that was, that resulted from that. And these two films remind me of that period in a lot of ways, that what it's like to make films with friends and what it's like to have that. There was a really good podcast on No Film School with one of the curators of Sundance that just went through and talked about that magic period of time. And I don't know, did it feel like that for you? Did it feel like this, I'm making films with friends, like that kind of magic that's there, or not?
Yeah, so the sort of the dimension of that answer that's kind of funny is, in the movie we couldn't be friends really, right? These two guys understand each other on some level. There's that connection. But to be making the movie with a lot of my friends, because they're the people who you can get to work on a movie the most easily generally, especially, again, when there's a global pandemic happening. But Will and I are friends. We like the dynamic, though, of not being nice to each other very much, which is, it's playful, right? Like, in reality, we're not as mean to each other as these characters are, but there's something very funny to us about picking these insecurities or picking these real problems. And so it was both a way to make a movie with friends and to, I think, have that natural element, right? That natural sort of the dynamic that we have probably is something that friends would have in general, but to not play into that and to play into more of things that we sort of probably think about in our lives, right? There was a point when Will wanted to be a more successful actor. There's times when I've wanted to get out of Omaha. And so we thought, let's just bring all that baggage in and slightly fictionalize it, make it a little stupider, a little more ridiculous and absurd, but about things that really bother us, so that the friendship could be confronting something that was a little bit raw and always close to drama without feeling too manipulative. And, trying to toe that line was, again, one of those things we struggled with, and we tried scenes different ways until we found it. And even when you think you find it, sometimes you're looking at all the footage you shot and realize, oh no, that it was there. Actually, it wasn't even the thing we thought in the moment. So a lot of discovery, which is easier to do when you trust that person, right? So I've known Will for a long time, and that friendship, I think, absolutely played into knowing that we would find it from the two of us, as opposed to maybe someone who I hadn't known, who I would have to find that trust in that process, which we just didn't have time for.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing, especially because you were wearing so many hats in the production of this film. To be able to have people there on your set that you can trust, that you've worked with before, that you kind of know and you already have a rhythm built up with. What was that experience like, being writer, producer, director, acting? What was that like for you, especially during lockdown?
It's never pleasant exactly, right? Because as when you're filmmaking, I think you always are a control freak to some extent, even if you want to find that discovery. If you're acting in particular, in my experience, you have to be in the scene, right? You have to be both present in the scene, and that part of your brain needs to be present of what it looks like for you to be in the scene. And that is very complicated, and I've never really loved doing that, but again, it sort of felt like for the rhythm of this movie, it needed to be Will and I, and so it's just sort of something that felt natural, and I wish I could have more control, but I know I can't. And when you're making a movie with very little money and very little time and resources, there's a degree to which you just aren't going to have total control, no matter how much of a control freak you are, right? Like, if I'm filming in real locations, there have been times, there was one part as we were filming this actually where we had cleared a location outside of a coffee shop in downtown Omaha. And so that was all how we had set it up, how we sort of thought about how to shoot it. And then that day they were doing road construction. So they're tearing up concrete, and it's so loud that we were not going to get any sound. And so literally we just walked down the street, asked another coffee shop, can we film there? Had to rethink the whole scene in that moment. And so I think for me, in terms of that control and that collaboration, it's just sort of like, you hope you are with people who understand your sensibilities enough, because a lot of the time you're going to have to be discovering something new, building something new. And you don't want people who will be frustrated by that. You want people who maybe aren't embracing that, because it's nicer if the plan works, but who are sort of like always in that problem-solving mode of, ooh, what about this? What if we try that? What if we move it over there? What if you say this instead? And so I've done productions that are a little more controlled. This one, again, was kind of built to be exploratory in all those ways anyway. And if there's tension, we could try to channel it into the scene. But yeah, it's really difficult. And it's really difficult to not know what the scene will be, which I didn't know, again, because I'm not behind the camera. I'm not shooting it. But then also, we just filmed a lot. And so there was a degree to which I could pretend to be the control freak here, but I knew I just needed to get enough that I could put it together. And so, yeah, working with people this was mostly people I'd worked with before. The director of photography was someone who I knew but I hadn't worked with. And what I always find is there's a rhythm that they need to get. And once they understand the rhythm that I like, then it tends to be fine. And it's not that they're like bringing disparate ideas. It just, the movie has a weird rhythm. And once we find that rhythm, everybody hopefully clicks into that. And I don't know in your experience, but it's always like that first day is awkward and you're like, you're not quite there. And then at some point, hopefully it clicks. And then it did.
So we were watching the film. We saw a lot of Omaha places that are really familiar to us as we were going through it. This is a fun film because in parts it's a real love letter to Omaha, but in parts too, there's a lot of tongue in cheek of like, well, there's nobody famous from here, the flyover state. So I want to talk about that part, about, the tongue in cheek about home or the love letter. Tell me about that.
Well, my joke as I was making it and trying to pitch it to people was it's instead of a love letter, it's more of a middle finger to Omaha, to my hometown. And well,
that's endearing.
I hoped it might be kind of endearing. And what has happened is I thought it might channel some real frustrations that people who have some kind of artistic ambition ran into some frustrations with that Omaha is a place where people can be creative, but there's not a huge infrastructure for it. And so I thought there would be kind of this recognition of it. I might have gone too far because what's the weird trajectory of this movie's release has been no Omaha festival wanted to touch it. Midwest, for the most part, it played in Seward. It played, I think, in Kansas and Chicago. But otherwise, the Midwest does not seem to really respond to it that much. And it has found a life in European art festivals mainly, which is not like I thought I made this kind of niche thing for Midwestern people, but it's won awards in like Dublin and Milan and Berlin and sort of like not at all a thing that I was chasing. And I still sometimes get emails from people who want to play it. And so where I've landed on with that is in making a movie that kind of is actually about my frustration sometimes with the Midwest. I think we reached some kind of weird European archetype of dumb Americans. Like they laugh at us in a way that the Midwest doesn't always want to laugh at itself. And so I don't know that it was totally successful in that regard, but it makes me laugh at least.
Now that I think about it though, pacing wise, I mean, as a film with subtitles for a foreign audience, it would probably play pretty well.
I think so too.
I hadn't thought about that, but that's a really good point. It's making me rethink some of my own stuff a little bit.
Well, this was not intentional, so I don't know what I did. Didn't mean to make a European comedy, but I guess that's where we landed.
Maybe it should be.
Maybe
it should be intentional. So I don't know.
That's the next move.
But anyway. So I know you had mentioned streaming. How can people see this picture?
It is on Amazon Prime. Hopefully soon it will be on Tubi and some of those other things. We're working through that right now. But yeah, if you want to rent it on Amazon, it's there for anyone who's looking.
Well, Tom, I can't wait to see you in person again. Maybe we'll grab a beer and laugh or something like that or get together. I know Shelby and I are both still touring around our last feature. So it's going some places still. We've still got a few bookings and stuff for it before. So I'm sure we'll probably see you out on the road someplace.
Maybe in Flatwater again.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing the director's panel again. I'll be there. We should meet up.
There we go.
Outstanding. I've never been on the director's panel, weirdly.
See?
But that's okay. Not that I'm bitter about it.
I have no control. Don't look at me. I don't stick on it.
No, it's okay. Tom, it's absolutely great to have you on the show. So thank you so much. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. And we have a second interview today on the Depth of Field podcast. We've got our friend Joe Frenna, and he is the writer and director of Spots of Waverly. Now, Joe and I are online friends, although I don't think we've ever hung out in person before, or even met in person before. But we're going to change that because, it's festival season, and I'm sure we're going to be seeing people as we're running around and stuff. But Joe, welcome to the show. We're really happy to have you on.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
All right. So if you could just get into it a little bit, obviously you started off as an actor. Can you tell us a little bit like how you got into the scene and then also what prompted you to start making your own films?
I am very, very much of an amateur. I am very comfortable on the stage. I'm comfortable in a theater. I'm comfortable directing theater. I'm comfortable acting on the stage. And I did a couple of movies for friends. Greg Holt's movie Without You, I had a small part in. I was a bad guy in that. And Carson Morrissey, I did a couple of films with her, most recently The Salvages. And I really enjoyed being on those sets. And I'd had an idea for a film in my head for a while, and it's something I've always wanted to do, but didn't have the guts to do it, mostly because of the technology aspect of it and the idea, the critic in the back of your head saying, you can't do that, you don't know what you're doing. If nothing else, I would like your viewers to take away from this interview the fact that if you have like a dream in your head that you want to make realized, you should do it. Because if I can do it, you can do it. And I'll tell you right now, my movie, Spots of Waverly, is a mess, but it's a beautiful mess. I love her. And I shot it in 6 days. And shooting a feature in 6 days in a lot of locations, never having done it before. There are moments in the film where you're going to look at it and you're going to say, okay, here's a guy learning how to use a camera. But there are also moments, I think, I think the whole thing holds together and is a really good story. I'm proud of the writing. I'm proud of the acting that my actors brought. And I can't believe I get people to actually commit to projects with me. I've done that for a long time with theater projects. I kind of do my own underground stuff in addition to like local community theater projects. The idea that I'm going to make a movie now, and I called people and they came, and it was a super awesome, fun, exciting, stressful, frustrating, exhausting shoot, and I took on way too much. And I had no idea what I was doing, but I love the outcome. And we had a premiere of it recently, last month in April, at the Hearst Center for the Arts here in Cedar Falls, and the audience really reacted in a very positive way. I had a lot of people who saw the film, especially people who don't know me from theater circles, who said, "Oh my God, that was so much better than I thought it was going to be." Like, because I'm just like some dude they know, and like, wait, you can't make a movie, it's like that voice in the back of your head. And there were people that I really respect who know a lot about theater, know a lot about acting, directing, things like that, who really enjoyed it. And I've had conversations with them since about like all the creakiness and the weirdness and the especially when it comes to the audio, to the sound, which was like my biggest weakness. I had a friend of mine who is a really tough critic, and she came up to me. She said it was engaging from the beginning to the end, and I felt so good about that. And I'm actually in the middle of two other projects right now. I have a short film that I'm doing called Rosie. That only came about because I have a friend who has Down syndrome, who I had with a cameo in Spots of Waverly at a scene in a dog park. And that scene, because of all the terrible audio situations, it was like super windy and I didn't know what to do with it. I had to cut that scene because I just couldn't make the audio work. And I was like, well, I can't cut Jamie's scene because she expects a red carpet. She bought a dress. She is expecting to walk down a red carpet as a superstar for this cameo. So I decided to cobble together an idea for a short film. And it features her, and she's the star of it, and it's such a rewarding experience. I'm like in the middle of shooting it, but we are going to premiere that in July 30th at the Hearst Center in Cedar Falls, along with the other production that I've got going on. It's called Thomas Underground, and it is the first thing I ever wrote. It was the first play I ever wrote, and I had put it on as a stage production, and I filmed it as a film. Last summer, and into I've got two more scenes just to finish up because I have a friend that I'm trying to wrangle to get that finished, who plays the part, and I'm editing both right now, and it's like this phenomenal experience, and like I feel like starting to be a filmmaker, as amateurish as I am like I found a huge piece of myself that I could have easily avoided due to fear or listening to that voice in the back of my head. So if anybody is like listening to this and has ever thought, oh man, I got this great idea for a movie, do it. The technology is there for you. The first film, Hot Spots, I rented equipment, and I just said, give me what you think would work for this, right? And they gave me the equipment, and I kind of figured out how to use it. And for Thomas, I'm shooting it on an iPhone, and I love working with the iPhone, and I'm excited to kind of see how that comes together. So
you missed it kind of in the other segment, because we were talking about your film especially really reminds me of that time before Sundance, the 16 millimeter time, where people were just kind of, let's rent a camera, we'll shoot what we've got, we'll do it with friends, we'll put it together. And it had that feeling. And there were times that it felt like a John Waters film to me. And I was like, oh, this is like a John Waters film, especially kind of the guy, they're gonna dress the guy to go out on the date. You've got the one guy that's in there. It's like, this is very much like a John Waters type character.
It felt like Divine was gonna come
out. So it was really, really fun. So I was like, oh, I get this. Yeah. So it took me a moment. I was like, I couldn't quite figure it out. And then it was like,
I know what this is.
Yeah, I know what this is. Yeah. So it was really cool to be able to kind of do that.
My greatest film hero is John Cassavetes. And I was kind of partially inspired by how he made Shadows, and he did it. He was a professional actor and a successful actor at the time, but he really didn't know how to make a movie, and they just did it, and they made every mistake he could possibly make. He said, in an interview, and it's like this landmark of independent filmmaking. Now, my movie's not a landmark of independent filmmaking, but it's still worth a watch.
Well, we always make the joke, and Shelby, what award would I like to win more than anything in all of film?
Cassavetes.
The Cassavetes. So, but anyway, all right.
I love that, though. I think it's a good transition, though, into kind of our next question, because we were wondering, what were your major influences making this film? Did you have, a particular film in mind that you wanted your film to look like or emulate? What was really driving you, or even directors that may have been, kind of maybe a better voice in the back of your head saying, hey, keep doing this, keep moving forward. Who was really inspiring you during this process?
Cassavetes, for sure. He is a positive voice in the back of my head. And it's not just his films that I love, it's his story. And I've read every book that, Ray Carney has written about him. And I really researched him, and I just find his take on life fascinating. And I would like to emulate that his fearlessness, the fact that he's not looking for perfection or to please anybody. And he was happy when his films like alienated parts of the audience, or he felt like, one person's going to love this part of the movie, but they're going to hate this part of the movie. And if you please everybody all the time, then you haven't really done something in his mind as worthwhile as if you've laid it all out there and dared to fail. And that's what we try to do on this. And as for what I wanted my movie to look like, I think it's interesting because having shot a movie for the first time now, we ran into problems where we had key scenes that we didn't have filmed, and I only had my lead actress for 6 days. She lived in Chicago at the time, and so I was like, yeah, fine, we can do this in 6 days. What did I know, right? And it was a total, like, for some people would call it a nightmare. I call it like a very exciting, thrilling ride. And by the end of the 6th day, it's 3 a.m. We're shooting in the bar, and like everybody's strung out, but they stuck with me, and it was time for me to make a decision. Like do I push these people further, or do I say I'll take what I've got, like you said, and I will problem solve it out? And that problem solving was like the most rewarding part. Like, oh crap, I don't have my ending. I don't have the part where she runs down the street after she's gone off with this other guy because she realizes that she deserves better and all this kind of stuff. I don't have that part, that tracking shot of her running that I had planned. And what I realized, it's kind of like the hand of, like, the cinema god saying, no, you don't need that stuff. And those scenes that got cut, I didn't need them, and they were kind of cliche. Like, she was supposed, she's at the bar with this guy, and he's a good guy, and they have and they develop these actual real feelings for each other, and she gets scared because she doesn't think she's worth, or she has enough value in herself to deserve a good person, and so she goes out and finds the first good-looking kind of sleazy guy she can, and she goes home with him. But then, something happens that reminds her, of who she was previously with, and she wants to go back to him, and so she in my mind, she busts out of the apartment, and she runs down the stairs, and she's running down the street, and then I was going to have like this nighttime shot where I get a shot of her boots running across, and then when I figured out how to do the ending where he's getting beaten up, and then the music starts, and you guys know how it ends, and it's such a simple ending. And it was so powerful. It got a huge applause at the premiere, and it feels good every time I see it. And when I show it to people, they're like, "Oh my God, I love that!" And it wouldn't have been the same thing if I'd had the ending that I wanted, because the ending that I wanted came from other movies. And the parts of the film I like are the parts that are original, the parts that are like only I could have done it, because that's only I could have seen, because only I could have dreamt it, and that kind of thing, And so I don't want my films to look like other films, but I do like when people say, "Oh, this is like this," or "This is like that," and because of course all those influences are in there, like you got The Godfather in the back here. Martin Scorsese is a director that I love, that influences me. I love the Coen brothers. I love. Last night I introduced my son to the Kill Bill movies. And and I love Quentin Tarantino and the magic that he does, and I don't understand why I love Quentin Tarantino movies. There's no logic to like why this works for me, but it does. And when I came out of the theater, when I saw Kill Bill, when it came out in theaters, it was one of like the most sacred walking out of a movie experiences of my life. And on paper, I shouldn't have liked the movie that much. I'm not into samurai films. I'm not like a huge Bruce Lee fan. I'm not like all the pop culture references that he used in that movie, and the kind of movie with the gratuitous violence. That's not really what I like. I like human things. But there's just something about what he did with that film that mesmerized me and made me like I didn't want to talk after. You know that feeling when you come out of a movie and it was so meaningful to you, and it's such a goofy film. And so what I want is for my films eventually to have that kind of impact on people, where when they shut it off or when they walk away from it, they're like have a feeling. I don't care what the feeling is, but I want them to have a feeling.
One thing we talk about, and there's always this discussion, I think, too, and of course I'm a film professor, and when we train people, a lot of it is, of course, the mechanical aspects of things, but also story and theory and those things. But you're coming at this from an actor's perspective. So I want to talk a little bit about that transition, the transition of what is it to be an actor and then to become a filmmaker, and what that's like. And I've heard a lot of the conversation we're having is how you see filmmaking. So I want to hear how you see that transition from actor to filmmaker.
As an actor, I feel like I have a lot of opinions about what makes great art, and like I think a lot of times what people look at as good acting isn't good acting, and a lot of it is showy, and a lot of it is untrue, and but we can do certain things to make people think, oh, that's real acting, because it sounds like acting. But if it sounds like acting, it's not acting. It's the great irony of it. And as a director on the stage, when I started directing on stage, and I started with high school and middle school productions, and then I got into the community theater and started working with adults. And no matter who you're working with, it's all the same. It's about getting them to be real about it. And when I moved over into films with this one movie I made, I took those values with me into it, and I would and a lot of my direction will bother actors because they. Sam, who plays the lead in this film, Sam Reese, she's a really, really good actor, and she's a big personality in life and on the screen, and she fills up the screen, and her energy is like a lot, right? And that's why I like her. But there are times when I had I had just no, I wanted her to do less. I didn't want her to work so hard. I wanted it to be simpler, and when the cool thing that I learned through this process is when you're editing and you're choosing the shots, it's like you have so much power and control over how the story is told, and it's like I could take all the stuff that I didn't think was meaningful, and I could just like crystallize this beautiful thing that is Sam, and kind of put that together and show that to the audience. And one of the coolest compliments I got was from somebody who I know a little bit, who's an actor who knows Sam for like years, and she said, and I don't think Sam would mind me saying that. She said, Sam has had a hard life, and the way she acts, usually she's not allowed to be sad. She's not allowed to be to have those lower things. She's always expected to be this big ebullient kind of bright light on a stage, right, kind of a thing. And that was interesting because I hadn't thought about it that way. And so this person felt like I gave Sam an opportunity to like be a little bit more of herself. Like you want everybody to bring all of themselves to the role, and I don't want people to hide stuff. And like, this is going to sound cheesy and stupid, but it is in my nature. But I love hearing stories about how Cassavetes would mess with his actors. Like Peter Falk has this story, like in like a lot of interviews that Peter Falk gives about Cassavetes. He's like, I'm sitting in the van, we're ready to go. I got everything, I got all my stuff polished and ready to go. And then John puts this hat on my head, this blue fishing hat. Now I got to deal with this. And then and he said that's what John wanted to do. He wanted to throw you off. He didn't want you to like give the performance that you were thinking of giving. He just wanted you to react in the moment, right? And I like doing that with actors. Grant Tracy, who played Treychef in the film, is my best friend in the world. He's my hero, and I am so horrible to him. I don't know why he's friends with me. Whenever I direct him, he can be so good, but he tends to go into shtick, And I just and we have this trusting relationship where I can be really, really mean to him. And if you were there and seeing how mean I was, you would think, "Oh my God, this guy's abusing this guy." But we're playing a scene back and forth is what we're doing as I'm directing him. And I'm just so mean to him, and I literally push him, and I'm like, "Just knock it off, whatever." And I'm yelling at him, right? And I don't do that to other people, but I do that to him. And I'll just slap and say, "Stop using your hands. Just stop thinking. Stop acting." And I just I lose my mind on him. And in the end, in the moment he doesn't like it, but then in the end he loves it because he knows that I can get better stuff out of him than if he didn't have that, because he's got all these brilliant ideas. He's a writer. He's a novelist, and he's a professor at UNI of film and creative writing, and he novelizes things, and he tries to novelize his performances. And I'm like, no, just respond, be impulsive, and that kind of thing. And so those are the things, and figuring out how I work with each actor. I couldn't do that with Sam. I couldn't do that with Mike, the other lead. Mike doesn't have as much experience. He did some theater in high school. And this was his first movie, and I love that he's got this kind of raw, kind of like unpolished acting style, and a lot of his responses were really impulsively valid. Like he had the responses of a silent film actor, the way he would honestly react to things, because I did surround him with a bunch of weirdos, and then Sam has this like. More polished, more experienced, more I've learned how to act. I've gone to school for acting, kind of a thing. And her character is much more of a performer in life, and his character is much more of a person who hides from the light, And so putting them together like that, and then I address Mike a different way, I just Sam a different way, Grant I just mean to, and you have all these different people coming in with all their eccentricities and stuff, and I let them kind of put that on display, and it was really fun.
We pointed out, we were both, when we watched the picture, her performance really stuck out to us. And something we were wondering is, we noticed that her hair was very, very short, almost non-existent. Is that how she wears her hair, or did she shave her hair for the film?
I wish I could get somebody to shave their head for a project. I don't think I have. I don't think I have that. Like I can give somebody to give up a Saturday, but not to shave their head. I had seen Sam around. It was like how you're involved in the community, and and like, oh yeah, I'll eventually work with this person someday, and then and you're like, oh yeah, I know, and you kind of know who you are, who the other person is without knowing them. Well, I was like beside myself trying to figure out who to cast in this role. I literally couldn't think of a single person who would act. I don't say actress because I don't just I ask people throughout my life who've never acted before, like, come on, just do this, right? You'll be fine. I'll help you, right? And I couldn't think of anybody who could play the part the way that I wanted her to be, and I just thought of her, and I'd seen her in one of Carson Morrissey's movies, and so I kind of like stalked her on Facebook a little bit in a friendly way, and I saw pictures of her, and I saw things that she was into, and her big smile, and I was like, oh yeah, that's her, and I got in touch with her, and she was like, yeah, I'll do it, and then she wanted to move into Chicago, and then I only had her six days, and so no, she did not shave her head for the role, but I wish I could get some people to do it. I wish I had that.
So this took 6 days total to for production then. How long was the pre-production?
Well, if you include writing it, it takes me 4 years to write something. It has been, the first thing I wrote was Thomas Underground, the play version, which was really a film script disguised as a play. I wrote that in like 2014. I had started writing it in like 2010, 2011 in my head, and I finally puked it out. Got it out of my system in like 2014, and then like 2018, I wrote this play called Mickey and Mikey, and then haven't done anything yet, but that's going down the road. And then Spots of Waverly came like almost exactly 4 years later, and it's hard. So that the writing of it gestated for a really long period of time. But when we talk about production, like, I didn't know what I was doing, so I went to Bus Stop Productions. Are you familiar with those guys? Eric Benson helped me out, and I'm not going to say that I don't want to put his name with my movie because he's a perfectionist, and and I got to know him just by renting equipment and getting advice from him, and it was. I said, okay, so I need some equipment. I don't know anything about anything. What should I use? And he's like, and he got me a camera, and he got me some equipment, and he's asking me questions because he's like a really like a helpful person, and he likes to be I found out later he likes to be a mentor to a lot of people, and he believes in film, believes in cinema, is an artist, and he said, so tell me more about your project. And I was like, well, we're going to shoot in 6 days. What? Well, actually, the first thing was, wait, your first film is going to be a feature? He started sweating, and I'm like, don't worry. I don't know what I'm doing, and this is like a real, like, I'm an amateur. I'm just going to see what happens. Don't worry about it. And he's like, he's like worried about me. He's getting like secondhand stress from this, and I wasn't even stressed about it. And then because I didn't know enough to be stressed about it, I was like, yeah. I'm not going to do a show. I just do this full like. And then I told him about all the locations. He's like, oh my god, you've never done this before. And then I said I was going to do it in 6 days, and he looked like he wanted to vomit. He was like, I was like, listen, don't worry about it. And he was just so worried for me and my project. So pre-production was like, okay, what do I need? I found locations, I got actors, I got the equipment that I didn't know how to use, and I figured out how to use it, and that was it. Like, there was no pre-production. There was not, like, the thought all went into the story, and all the questions about, well, how do you actually make a movie? I was like, well, I'll figure it out, and that's kind of what I did. So everybody out there is listening, if you have an idea for a movie, you need to make that movie, because the feeling of presenting that movie to an audience and hearing them laugh and hearing them applaud at the end and stay in just to watch the credits and talk to you about it later and like that you in some way move them, entertain them, it's like the greatest thing ever. And if you're watching this podcast, you're that's the kind of person you are, and so you just need to do it.
Well, and a shameless plug here, at the Depth of Field Festival, we're going to have 2 classes. Shelby's going to teach a class on writing your first feature, and I'm going to teach a class on producing your first feature. So if you have questions about making your feature, come to the Depth of Field Film Festival in September, and maybe come to our class, because we hopefully we know what we're doing. I hope so. So the film was really well received, I know, and I'm really excited. Please keep us informed. My daughter actually lives in Cedar Falls, or actually she lives in Waterloo, but she lives in that area. So having an excuse to come for a premiere is always good, to go see my daughter and come for a premiere.
July 30th, the Hearst Center for the Arts in Cedar Falls, and everybody should come see it. The next film is going to be Thomas Underground, and there's going to be a short film that goes with it called Rosie.
Nice. We're really
Fantastic.
excited about that. Oh, and on the culinary side, there's a really good pizza place called Doughy Joey's.
Doughy Joey's in Waterloo.
And it's a Chicago-style pizza place, and it's dynamite.
I like Doughy Joey's.
I like that
Hey,
place.
and I know you invited me here, and I'm, I want to be a good guest. I don't want to be rude or anything, but I am from New York, and I'll tell you,
The Fold It Pizza.
yeah. So I'm a bit of a pizza snob.
Okay.
Just come to the screening, and then I'll tell you where to go get pizza.
Okay. I'm all right with that.
No
Probably not Doughy
problem.
Joey's.
No
Doughy
problem.
Joey's is a fun place. Kids like it. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to get the real culinary lowdown from Joe. Okay, so anyway, Joe, we can't tell you how much we've appreciated having you on the show. It's just been super fun. So I'm sure we're going to find you out there. And for everybody who's listening, we are going to see everybody in a couple of weeks with our next episode. So you can find us on all your favorite platforms as the Depth of Field podcast. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you for listening to Depth of Field, and check us out on YouTube and Spotify, where we post new episodes every 2 weeks.